I want you to imagine this. A product that generates profit without a factory, without raw materials, without shipping. It's invisible, yet it breathes through every corner of our modern economy. And we, all of us, consume it every single day without even realizing it. That product is debt. Debt is perhaps the strangest invention humanity ever created. Thousands of years ago, when the Babylonians recorded loans on clay tablets, they already knew one thing. If too many people were trapped in debt, society would collapse. That's why they declared debt jubilees, moments when all debts were erased so people could start again. In the Bible, every 50 years, debts were forgiven, a reminder that no human being should ever be enslaved by numbers. But as time passed, something changed. The powerful realized that forgiving debt brought no profit. But keeping people indebted, even dependent on it, opened the door to endless power. And so, debt stopped being a burden to manage and became a product to design, a sophisticated creation that makes money out of promises. Today, that product still exists, invisible, refined, and powerful. It buys not only homes, cars, and education, but also control. And if we don't understand it, then maybe we're not the customers anymore. We're the product. Now imagine Europe in the Middle Ages, cathedrals rising to the sky, faith ruling over every corner of life. The church called lending with interest a sin, an offense against God, because according to belief, only God could create time, and interest was how humans tried to profit from someone else's time. But power always finds a way. Merchants and bankers, especially the Medici family in Florence, learned how to bend the rules. They disguised loans as trade contracts, renamed interest as fees, and turned sin into an art form. And from that art, a new kind of power was born. No armies, no thrones, just ledgers. Families like the Medicis didn't just lend to kings and popes, they bought influence. With every loan, they shaped politics and steered empires. Not with swords, but with ink. Debt was no longer about money. It became a silent weapon of power. A king may rule his nation, but if he owed the bankers, who truly ruled him? From that moment, history shifted. Money and power stopped being separate. They became two sides of the same coin, stamped with one word: debt. The 17th century ushered in a new age, a time when cannons were powered not by gold, but by trust. When the Dutch fought for independence from Spain, they invented something revolutionary. They sold government debt to their own people. Citizens could lend money to the state, receive interest, and trade these bonds like property. For the first time, debt became a tradable commodity. The people weren't just taxpayers anymore, they were investors in their nation's wars. And when this model spread to England, it transformed global finance forever. In 1694, the Bank of England was born, a radical institution where the government could borrow directly from a central bank, which in turn issued money backed by that debt. For the first time, a nation didn't need to wait for gold or silver to fund its ambitions. It could simply borrow from the future. War, once limited by the weight of a king's treasury, now had no end. Each battle was financed by bonds, and every victory brought more markets to tax, which meant more borrowing, more lending, more profit. The perfect loop. The more nations fought, the more they borrowed. The more they borrowed, the richer their creditors became. Debt was no longer a tool. It was the fuel of empires, the invisible force that built the modern world. Then came the Industrial Revolution, and debt became the oxygen of progress. Railways that stretched for miles, factories that never slept, ports overflowing with goods, all of it built on borrowed money. Without credit, there would be no steel, no steam, no cities of glass and smoke. But soon, debt trickled down from kings and banks into ordinary homes. Workers began borrowing to buy their first houses, their tools, their dreams. And society told them that was good. that borrowing was not failure, but a path to prosperity. By the 20th century, debt had become a mass market product. Mortgages, student loans, credit cards, every stage of life came with a payment plan. People stopped asking, "Do I have enough money?" They started asking, "Do I have enough credit?" Debt became a lifestyle, a collective belief that the future could be bought today, one installment at a time. Think about it. That house you buy with a 30-year mortgage might end up costing 2 or 3 times its price tag. Yet no new bricks are added, no new rooms appear. It's just a transfer from your hands to someone else's. Every interest payment isn't just money for the past. It's fuel for a system designed to keep you paying forever. A home, a degree, a car. They're not just possessions. They're instruments of profit for someone else. And that's the brilliance, or cruelty, of it all. Debt is the most successful business model ever created. No factories, no materials, just time and a promise. You make money by selling people the belief that they'll pay you back. And while the borrower trades away years of labor, the lender earns from the clock itself. The more people borrow, the stronger the system grows. The more dependent we become, the more it profits. And when society starts celebrating debt as a symbol of maturity, dependence has already been disguised as success. Debt doesn't just take your money, it takes your freedom, one payment at a time. After World War II, the world lay in ruins. Nations were broke, economies shattered. So, leaders gathered to rebuild order. And from that came the Bretton Woods system, along with two of the most powerful institutions in modern history, the IMF and the World Bank. On paper, they were created to help, to bring stability and development. But behind the elegant language lay a quiet mechanism of control. Poor countries could borrow, yes, but under strict conditions. Cut public spending, privatize state assets, open markets to foreign investors. It sounded like reform. But in truth, it was a recipe to shift power, from governments to global creditors. Thus, a web of global debt emerged. Nations that had fought for freedom found themselves bound again, this time by signatures in Washington and Basel. Sovereignty faded. Decisions about education, energy, and wages were no longer made in their capitals, but in boardrooms half a world away. Debt had once again become a political weapon, wrapped in the language of humanitarian aid. The world thought it had found stability, but what it really built was a hierarchy of dependence, ruled by those who held the money. After 1945, a new dream swept across America, the middle-class dream. Banks and corporations had found a softer, more seductive form of control: consumer debt. They brought credit into every home, selling happiness with a signature. You don't have to wait, you just have to sign. People started buying houses on mortgages, cars on installments, and desires on credit cards. Buy now, pay later became the slogan of a new prosperity, or perhaps the illusion of one. Borrowing stopped being shameful. It became a badge of success. The more you could borrow, the more trustworthy you appeared. Banks weren't just lending money, they were selling dreams and charging interest on hope. Governments borrowed to spend. Corporations borrowed to expand. Individuals borrowed to maintain lifestyles. Growth seemed endless, but it was an illusion built on borrowed foundations. Every smile at the dinner table, every car in the driveway, all of it, financed by money that didn't yet exist. And as the world danced to the rhythm of credit, few noticed that the dream itself was being kept alive by dependency. A beautiful prison, built one loan at a time. Then came the 21st century, and the addiction deepened. Banks began slicing, bundling, and repackaging debt into new financial products. They called it innovation. In truth, they were selling risk disguised as safety. Mortgages, car loans, and corporate bonds were bundled and traded worldwide. Everyone believed the system was safe until 2008, when the illusion shattered. The housing bubble burst. Millions of Americans lost their homes. And when the dust settled, the question echoed, who got saved? Not the families who lost everything, but the banks that caused the collapse. Governments poured trillions to save the system, because if the system fell, everything would. But the system was the addict. Instead of detoxing, we doubled the dose. Lower interest rates, cheaper credit, more borrowing. Debt didn't shrink after the crisis. It exploded. It became the permanent architecture of the global economy, a chronic disease everyone knows is deadly, yet no one dares to cure. Today, we live in the digital age of debt. Global debt has surpassed $300 trillion, 3 times the world's annual output. A number so large it's almost meaningless, yet its weight presses on every life. Inflation is the invisible tax that keeps the machine running. It quietly drains value from your pocket so that those massive debts can remain payable. When prices rise, you're not just paying more, you're paying off the world's debt dollar by dollar. Governments borrow to survive. Corporations borrow to grow. People borrow to get by. But not all debt is equal. The rich borrow cheaply to invest. The poor borrow expensively to survive. That's how inequality compounds. Every interest payment from the bottom becomes another dividend at the top. We no longer live in an economy of production. We live in an economy of promises, a system built on the belief that debt can last forever.